to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, a podcast where we explore what it's like getting older, the peaks, the valleys, and everything in between. In this season of Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, we're covering topics related to vibrant aging. I'm your host, Cheryl Proska. Let's grow old together. Today, we're talking about the power of books, community, and intergenerational connection. My guests are Kerry Roeder, Executive Director of Historic Fair Hill, and Jean Hurd, a Friends Life Care member and community advocate. Historic Fair Hill is a Quaker burial ground in North Philadelphia that has transformed into a vibrant hub for literacy, gardening, and social justice. I had the pleasure of meeting Kerry and Jean through a Friends Life Care book collection that supported Historic Fair Hill's mission to reopen school libraries and spark a lifelong love of reading in local children. Kerry and Jean, welcome and thank you for joining me. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
So glad to hear it. So throughout this episode, we'll learn about Historic Fair Hill, why older adults play such a meaningful role as mentors and reading buddies, and how staying engaged in your community can be an essential part of aging vibrantly. Let's start by having you both introduce yourselves and explain your roles with Historic Fair Hill. Kerry, can you go first?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us, Cheryl, and hello to all of your listeners. We're really excited to have this opportunity to share. I first came to Historic Fair Hill in 2020 as the program manager, and then stepped into the role of executive director in 2022. And prior to that, I had spent 13 years working in schools as a librarian, an English teacher, and an administrator. Now my role as executive director is really just overseeing our organization and its operations and helping to guide it into the future.
Jean, can you also introduce yourself?
Sure, and thanks also for the opportunity. So I've been on the board of Historic Fair Hill for 8 years. I started as a reading buddy within the organization, and then was instrumental in helping to reopen the libraries in our schools. And today I serve on the board, and I also work primarily in the libraries.
Oh, well, thank you both so much for your introductions. Now let's get into learning more about the heart of Historic Fair Hill. So, Kerry, can you tell us the story of Historic Fair Hill and also things like talk about its Quaker roots and its role in the community today?
Sure. So as you mentioned, Historic Fair Hill is a small nonprofit located in North Philly. And our work started 30 years ago when friends and neighbors came together to clean up an abandoned historic graveyard. The story of the site itself really started in the 1700s when George Fox envisioned the space as a burial ground and a meeting house, as well as a place for children to play and where people could garden together. And so it was used as a small site in that way in the early 1700s, but really had a resurgence in the 1840s when Hicksite Quakers began using it as a burial ground. And so as a result, a number of incredible abolitionists and activists are buried in Fair Hill, including Lucretia Mott, Robert Purvis, Harriet Fortin Purvis, Edward Parrish, and Anna Jeanes. And it continued as a burial ground for members and non-members throughout the early to mid-1900s. Post-World War II, though, it became harder to maintain the grounds, and the neighborhood was seeing a real steep economic decline, coupled with institutionalized racism and leading to a rise in poverty and violence in the area. So in 1974, the meeting house was actually leased out, and in 1985, the property was officially sold. So as you can imagine, after 20 years of neglect, it was completely overrun with weeds, sections of the surrounding fence were stolen, trees and headstones were damaged. And it was just kind of this unsupervised space that then people were also exploiting to buy, use, and sell drugs. And it was just adding damage to a neighborhood that was already suffering so much. So in the early 1990s, a small but passionate group of Quakers and neighbors came together to start cleaning it up. So they were coming out on Saturdays to, do some cleaning, but realized quickly that it wasn't enough just to do it once a week. And so they decided to form a nonprofit, which is Historic Fair Hill, initially with the mission just to raise funds to buy the property so that we could really take care of it. And so we were able to do that. It took 5 years to even be able to mow the lawn. That's how damaged the property was. But they stuck with it. And by 2000, it became this serene place of beauty and reflection and community. It's now a level 1 arboretum. And then we've spent the last 25 years really just trying to build up programming there and finding innovative ways to utilize this space and connect with our wider community.
That is a truly amazing story, and just what a benefit you're providing to the community at large, and especially the children's lives that you're serving that may be growing up in a difficult area. So it's just so inspiring, and it makes me start to think about like the values that your organization must have, things like equality, education, and social justice. So how would you say that your core values help you to guide the mission and keep it alive?
Well, thank you for saying all of that. Our organization is really, I think, being rooted in this particular burial ground and having such rich history. The values of those abolitionists and activists really do guide all that we do. And so we like to think about our work as honoring our history by taking action. Um, and you mentioned our community, and in all of our public messaging, we work to be really positive and respectful about our neighborhood, which is filled with loving, engaged, caring residents. But the harsh reality is that it continues to be a community plagued by poverty, violence, and systemic racism. And so Fair Hill has long had the highest poverty rate in the city. Most of our children are living below the poverty line. Only 1 in 7 children are reading on grade level in Fair Hill, and nearly half of adults don't have a high school education. And we know that life expectancy decreases for people without a high school education. So it's through our community and literacy and greening work that we're really striving to provide access and opportunity, and hoping that that leads to value and to hope for the future. And I think we're also trying to look at systemic causes behind all of those
Mhm.
inequities so that we can ultimately contribute to trying to break cycles of intergenerational poverty.
And one way in which you're doing that is through your early literacy program. Can you just tell us more about that and the specific ways that it does support children and families in your community?
Yeah, so that really came about due to the efforts of our previous executive director, the amazing Jean Warrington. She was part of just starting to envision the space as going beyond the ground itself and thinking about the impact we could have in the wider community. So she had already begun, planning community events with neighbors and hosting festivals and building up gardens so that we could be giving out food weekly. And just in getting to know our neighbors more and more, she was having lots of conversations and, just asking what else can we be doing. And literacy came up over and over again as real a real issue. And so for those who may not know, the state itself is in the midst of a literacy crisis. And I encourage listeners to visit the Pennsylvania Literacy Coalition's website at paliteracy.org to find out more. But for us, thinking about literacy as the foundation for opportunity, thinking about it as literacy as liberation and how it connects to our abolitionist history, we developed school partnership programs that focus on literacy with 4 public schools that are all within walking distance of the burial ground. Um, so that started with a simple Reading Buddies program where volunteers meet with children weekly. Jean has been part of this. And it's just reading with kids one-on-one and providing encouragement and mostly just showing up for kids regularly, right? Um, and so while working in that first partner school and doing this Reading Buddies program, our volunteers were shocked to see that the library was closed. And so the school district of Philadelphia does not currently fund school libraries or school librarians due to budget cuts. And so most school libraries in the district are closed and have shelving pushed aside, or they're being used for other purposes, or there's books there, but kids don't have access to them. And so as an organization with a history connected to abolition, we really understand the enormous power of literacy and wanted to be part of protecting the right to read. And so over the last 10 years, we've been able to reopen, operate, and staff 4 public school libraries. And these libraries are now open regularly for children to have scheduled library classes with read alouds, checkout times, and literacy activities. As Jean mentioned, she's in the libraries regularly working with their kids. And we see over 2,000 kids a week and are circulating more than 50,000 books a year. And then to round out our literacy support in the schools, we realized, of course, that teachers need extra support. And so we developed our classroom literacy assistant program. And these are assistants who are bilingual moms from Fair Hill. Their kids go to the schools that they're working in, and we hire them and pay them to support literacy in the classrooms 5 days a week.
I mean, my son's favorite class at school is library, and he is always so excited to go and get a book read to him by the librarian and take a book home and wants to read it right away. So hearing that other children don't have that opportunity, which I know that my family is taking for granted, is just amazing to hear that you're providing that opportunity. And one way you're providing that is through volunteers like Eugene. So if you can tell us about your experience, either as a reading buddy or being in the libraries, I think that would be so impactful for our listeners to hear.
Sure. So I have to say what drew me to Fair Hill was I love books. I love reading with kids. And I had that always in my mind and happened to stop into Chestnut Hill meeting one Sunday. And again, the amazing Jean Warrington. People were actually sharing that Sunday about feeling helpless. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to help. And she stood up and said, well, there's a group of us reading to kids in Fair Hill. Anybody who might be interested in that, give me a call. So I called Jean and I went down and I started doing reading buddies, started learning about what was going on there. And then I think, honestly, what clinched it was there's a video on the website, a 10-minute video about how the neighbors first came together around Fair Hill. And it was some formidable women, and the police started working with them, and then Fair Hill volunteers, Quaker volunteers, and just the sense of community and the sense of passion and mission was just, I was hooked. So working in the schools is just an incredible experience.
So people at any age can volunteer, of course. Working in aging services and with older adults, there is an inclination for people who may be retired to be able to volunteer their time. And I understand at Historic Fair Hill, there's opportunities to volunteer in a lot of different ways. And I'd be curious to hear from both of you. And how have you seen like the volunteers, the unpaid participants of Historic Fair Hill make an impact on the organization and the community? Do you want to start, Kerry? And then I also think it'd be great to hear from Eugene about this question.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think just building off of what you were both also just saying, I think when we think about the importance of literacy and the importance of having libraries in these schools, it's part of it is exposing kids to new ideas and making them laugh in the middle of the day by a silly story, and making sure they can see themselves in a book. But it's the foundation for opportunity, right? And thinking about the importance of literacy in someone's life and how I mentioned at the beginning, it can impact life expectancy, right? And when we think about literacy, thinking about it also in terms of the importance of being able to read a rental agreement and make sure you're not getting scammed, make sure you can read medical forms for your child at the doctor's office. There's all of these elements. And we know that if children are not reading by 4th grade, it's a real indicator of whether or not they'll be able to finish high school. And so, because fourth grade is when kids go from learning to read to reading to learn. And so it's really important to us to make sure that we're there at those early grades, trying to make sure that they are getting to be proficient by the time they're in fourth grade, so that then they can learn all the wonderful things out there and move forward. And so our reading buddy volunteers are definitely a big part of that. The reading buddy program is not a high impact tutoring program or an intervention program. It's really just building up confidence in kids and showing up for kids. Our buddies come in weekly. They have the same kids that they're seeing each week. So they're getting to know them. They're building up trust. They know that this kid really loves truck books. This kid really loves Elephant and Piggy, and they can really build a rapport in that way. And we often talk about how just the conversation that our buddies have when they're walking the kids from the classroom to the library can be the most impactful part of a kid's day, right? Just asking how they're doing and listening to them, and letting them be a little silly and moving around a little while they're reading. So all of that is so important. And it's just about expressing a love of reading and being able to, I keep going back to laughter and just kind of the joy, I think, that our reading buddies are able to share with their kids, and that their kids really share with them as well. I think it's a really mutually beneficial program. Our buddies, once they're in, they're hooked, and they just kind of keep coming back and ask to do even more days. And it's a really wonderful program and a wonderful way to just share your talents. And you don't have to be an educator. You can just be someone who loves kids, loves books, wants to make a difference.
Speaking of that mutually beneficial relationship for the students and the community that's being impacted, as well as the individual volunteers, Jean, cue you to come in to talk about how have you been impacted by volunteering with the organization, and how have you seen the time and resources that you're contributing have an impact on others?
Yeah. So again, I'm mostly working in the libraries now, and it's been again such an amazing. You can read about the fact that all the school libraries in Philadelphia were closed, and you think, wow, that's terrible. But until you're actually in one of these schools, where you just see that here's this dead space for kids that again often don't have access to books at home and haven't been to the library. So one of my first experiences was with a little boy, a third grader, who I was actually reading with. And he said, we're supposed to write down what we read last night, but I don't have any books at home, so I can't do that. And I said, well, you're going to be able to get them from the library. And he said, we don't have a library. And I said, well, you're going to soon. And it's the same kid, like the next year, you see him dancing down the hall with his book. And he's my little third grader who just graduated from high school. So
Wow.
I know. So I kept up with him all the way through. It was just amazing. But again, to just get that visceral experience of what they're up against, didn't have books at home, didn't have access to that. And literally, I mean, Kerry mentioned this, but a couple of years into the library, this second grade class came out of the library down the hallway. I mean, they were skipping and hugging their books. It was just, you just can't you just can't imagine how exciting it is for kids. And the opportunity for them to do something outside, again, of the classroom, as Kerry said, a couple little girls came in a few years in and said, do you have any books on rocks? It's like, well, we do, I mean, she said, because we're finding rocks and finding out they're pretty interesting. So we went to the section, the nonfiction, where the rock books were, and they were so excited. And the next time they came, there were 4 of them, and they were like, wow, rocks. And I said, there's a whole career around this. You could be a geologist. Whoa, and, just the sorts of things that a library does. And when you think, if that's completely missing from these kids' lives, the difference that it makes. So for me, it's been the opportunity, it's been a humbling experience um, to really understand how gifted we are in the community where I live and in most communities with things we take for granted. I talk to people sometimes that says, well, I mean, if there's not a library, I mean, come on, they've got books at home, they've got books in the classroom, you know, and then, people just don't understand, the difference that it makes because we sort of take that for granted. So that's the main thing it's done for me is it's just widened my horizon and understanding of the issues and how, again, some very simple things can make a huge difference.
It makes me think about the ability to help young children explore their interests at an early age. And it's definitely something I take for granted. If one of my children has an interest, I'm like, okay, let's figure out everything we can about this. And, just to get you a little bit more knowledge to see like how far you might want to take it. And not every child has that. Would you prefer to age independently in your own home or live in a nursing facility? I know what I'd rather do. Friends Life Care membership offers just that. Plan today for a future lived at home with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience while protecting your savings. Learn about your options at a free seminar or webinar. Register at friendslifecare.org/register or call 215-628-8964. Welcome back to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, where today I'm joined by Kerry Roeder and Jean Hurd to learn about historic Fair Hill and discuss how volunteerism is a key ingredient in vibrant aging. Something else that's coming up for me is having another adult who consistently shows up for a child in a caring and educational way obviously is making a difference because you've watched a student go from second grade all the way to graduating high school, which is a really big deal. And I mean, Jean, there's probably people out there listening thinking, oh, I'd like to volunteer somewhere, but I don't exactly know where to start. So like what would your advice or guidance be for our older adults, our retirees out there who are feeling maybe I do want to volunteer in the community, but they don't quite know where to start?
Right. Great question. And, I think first of all, it's again, just thinking about again, what it is you love, what brings you alive. What do you love to do? Who are the people you like to be around? What's the environment you like to be in? And you may have a specific skill, that's relevant and you may not. You may just want, I have an example of an acquaintance who loves the theater. And so she's a ticket taker at community theater. Now, she's doing an incredible service and she's in the environment she wants and, and it's opened her to a whole new world. So I think the main thing is just, looking at what your passion is, you know, um, you may have a specific skill that you think, oh, I could use this, or you may not. You may think, I have no idea what skill I have, but here's the sort of environment or group I'd like to work with. I'd like to work in a library. I don't know. I don't have any particular skills, but I love books. I love kids. Great. We have people who have started, they come to the library and they reshelve books, and that is a huge difference because it frees everybody else up to work with the kids and we don't have to be doing that. So, you just jump in and start with something. And one thing invariably leads to another. There's just no question about that. And again, I always feel like, we may have a life skill or a professional skill, or all of us have the wisdom that comes with 60 or 70 or 80 or 90 years of life. And there are people out there who can benefit from that. And it's a mutual thing because it broadens our horizons as well.
It goes to show how every contribution, every bit counts, and there's so many opportunities to get involved. And the way that I had the pleasure of being introduced to Kerry and Jean and Historic Fair Hill was through a book drive that Friends Life Care did to help generate books to stock the shelves in the libraries. So I was I was part of this, like at the very end of where the book drive was happening, and we were learning about you and your organization. I'd love to hear the story from you about how the collaboration between Friends Life Care and Historic Fair Hill came about.
Sure. Well, we were just having our yearly meeting with our care coordinator, Roseanne Mancini, and she always asks about, what we're involved in, what we're doing, how we stay active. And both my husband and I, because he also volunteers with Fair Hill, we're just talking, with incredible enthusiasm about the work we do with Fair Hill and how wonderful it is, and how satisfying. And she just said, this is really a great story. I'm going to take this back to Friends Life Care, and I never thought anything more of it. And then the next thing, we get this call, and they're interested in partnering with us to do a book drive, and Kerry and I went in and did a talk for the staff, and but that's really how it started.
And I mean, that, at the time of recording this episode, the book drive was a number of weeks or maybe even a month ago. And I'd love to hear, Kerry, from you. What did the book collection accomplish for the schools and the students?
Yeah, so the books donated were absolutely fantastic, and they've helped fill the shelves of our school libraries. Each of our libraries, when we were reopening them, they started with mostly very, very old books that had been there for many years while the libraries were closed, or donations that were a lot of people just kind of getting rid of their trash, essentially. Right. And so we had a lot of books that were out of date or just insufficient, or that we just didn't want to share with our kids because they deserve so much more. And so we've really worked to curate collections that are of interest to our kids. And it's so important that we're not sharing books that are damaged or inappropriate or out of date. And so Friends Life Care really did just such a great job of listening to us when we shared about that, and really delivered with books that were, a lot of them were new, or they were just very gently used. But they were books our kids want to read, which really makes a difference, and books that are high quality and that we, feel good about sharing with our kids. We never want to make our kids feel less than. And if we're able to give them a brand new shiny book that's, popular and that's fun and of interest, it makes a really big difference. So we were just so grateful that Friends Life Care, I think, approached this book drive with the thoughtfulness and with the dignity that our kids deserve.
And what a great feeling it is to find an author or a series that you just can't put down, that you just want to keep reading and reading, and the ability to, start building that imaginative muscle in the child's mind through books and through new learnings and new readings. And so it was absolutely our pleasure to work together with both of you. In the vein of the theme of this season of the podcast, which is vibrant aging, I'd love to hear from you, Jean, about how might you connect, the phrase vibrant aging with being engaged in community initiatives like this one and your volunteerism.
Yeah. So I just think it's everything. The difference that it makes, we can reach a point where we feel like, well, we've done a lot in our lives and maybe there's not so much more, that we can really do that's of value or whatever. And to just, be aware that there's so much need out there, and that we have so many things that we can contribute that we may have no idea about. But I think it's everything. The connection to the community, the connection to what's going on in the world, the connection to the needs that's out there. It's and especially with Friends Life Care, it just so connects with the core Quaker values, of service, and there's just nothing like that feeling. And the other thing is that it connects us to a broader community of people. So I have, because it's not just where you're volunteering, but then you meet those people and they're doing other things and that, and it's just an expanding circle. So, another thing, that we all know is as we get older, we can, we can feel isolated or that we're not as connected. And it's just, again, just finding that small in for whatever sort of brings us alive. And then one thing leads to another. You're contributing to the community, you're meeting new people, expanding your horizons. You find out, I know somebody that started volunteering again, just doing like back office stuff. And she ended up working with clients, but she had no feeling or understanding about that. It's just, you jump in and away you go.
And that's the purposeful part of it, and the momentum that it's building for the organization where you're volunteering, and then it can even be your own personal momentum. And perhaps you find a new passion, or you find that at this time in your life you're ready to step out of your comfort zone and try something new, because if not now, when? So that's all very encouraging to hear. And from your perspective, Kerry, what do your older adult volunteers bring to Historic Fair Hill's work and community life?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, the answer right off the bat is just they bring a wealth of experience, right? And we have a lot of people who are hired educators or who have worked with children in various ways. And so that's all super important. But I think the bigger part for me is really thinking about the real empathy and hope that our older volunteers bring. And in thinking about the future, I think a lot of our volunteers have seen the world change so much in their lifetime, right? And I think can also help remind us and remind our kids that we're working with that progress can feel slow and even halted at times, but that ultimately things can and do get better, and that it's up to us to be taking action and not giving up and just kind of trying to see it through and doing our part. Um, so I think that that's definitely something that comes through in our volunteers, um and having older volunteers working with 5 and 6 year olds. It's a really special relationship that they're able to form, and there's um just kind of, I think a lot of our volunteers approach this as like their grandkids, right? And just so the love and the care that they bring to all of our kids is just so special.
So we've talked about how individuals can get involved with the Reading Buddies program and involved in early literacy and the school libraries. I understand that there are also other opportunities to volunteer with Historic Fair Hill. And while we did focus on the literacy side of it, if you want to share more about the other opportunities, let's hear them now.
Sure. So yeah, maybe I'll just give a brief overview of the whole other piece that we do is the outdoor piece. So
Perfect.
I mentioned the burial ground in the beginning, and after it was cleaned up, we've really tried to open it up as much as we can to our neighbors. It's one of the few green spaces in Fairhill, and so trying to have people see it as their backyard and a place where they can come and find some peace and where kids can run around and just be kids. So every Saturday we have family fun days, and we have programming going on for kids. We have art and music and dance, and the Philly Goat Project comes, and we had pony rides last weekend at our Joy and Wellness Festival. So there's always things going on for kids. We have a youth internship program that runs throughout the year, where kids learn gardening and leadership and empowerment about their community. We have 5 gardens that we maintain in and around the burial ground, and we're able to have garden classes for kids there as well. And from those gardens, we're able to harvest fresh produce weekly that we share with our neighbors. So we set up a table every Friday, and we give out produce as well as books and resources. And we do lots of field trips and history trips and mural tours and all sorts of things. So if people are interested in gardening, we can definitely always use extra hands in the gardens. Our garden days are Wednesdays and Saturdays. Um, and then in the schools, there's, opportunities to become a weekly reading buddy. And then if you feel like you can't make the commitment to come every week, and we talked about just the importance of the consistency of that program for the kids, but if you feel like you can't make that commitment, we have 4 libraries. And so just having an extra set of hands there, whether it's once a month or sort of when you can, people can volunteer in that way. In any of the volunteering with the schools, you do need to have your clearances, but we help you through that process and try to make it as painless as possible. And then I think, when Jean mentioned too, just behind the scenes help is always really helpful too. So if people have special skills or talents in finance or marketing or HR and they want to be able to share that with us, we could always use help. We're a tiny staff doing a lot of big things. So I think just if you're listening and something is clicking with you and you think that you could be of service, let us know and we'd be happy to figure something out of how to partner together.
What's the best way for people to learn more or get in touch with you or sign up to be able to help?
So our website is historicfairhill.com, which has lots of great information about all of the different things we do. And people can also email me directly at info@historicfairhill.com. And then I can put you in touch with, depending on what program you're interested in volunteering with, either Martina, our literacy director, or Tito, our green space director.
And I will link both the website and the info email in today's show notes so people can easily access those resources. Just a couple more questions for you both. Jean, you've touched on this a bit, and I just want to ask you to leave us with a message for our listeners, our audience, about staying engaged and purposeful.
Again, think about those things that you love, what you might like to be more involved in, and don't worry about it. You're not applying for a job. It's not your career. That's what's so much fun. I mean, you can try something out. As Kerry said, you might, and you might think, this isn't the greatest fit. You try the next thing. But to just, you may have specific skills and you may not, but if you just think of what the needs are in the world and what you care about, there's a way to be involved and really make a difference in the world. And we just see it. I see it every single time I'm down at Bear Hill in the school. I tell people, they say, "I can't believe you do this all." I said, "Oh, it's a natural high." I mean, it brings so much joy at every single time. I would just tell people, just try it. Just, try something. And one thing leads to another for sure. So even if you find yourself in the place that you think, this isn't right, those people will know somebody and away you go. So.
I love that. And I love how you're saying that it's okay to try a few different things. And when you feel that, when you say you get that, like those endorphins, and you're there and you feel good and you leave and you feel good, you'll know when you find the right fit, when you know you're making a difference for the community, for the people and organization serving, as well as for yourself. So that's excellent advice. And then, Kerry, in closing, what is your vision for Historic Fair Hill's future?
So I think the biggest thing for me is always sustainability, making sure that we can continue to generate the funding and talents and interests to keep doing what we're doing and doing it well. And part of that's just continuing to be responsive to the needs and interests of our neighbors. So I think continuing to bring more and more neighbors into our work and into leadership are essential. We now have one of our youngest staff members is a kid who came up playing at the grounds, and then he was an intern and now he's a staff member. We have a board member who went to our partner schools and was gardening with us and now is on the board. And so just continuing to make sure that it's community focused and is really important to me. And then one of the ways we're looking to strengthen all of our work and think about the future is building a building across the street. So that's going to be our next big project of making sure that we can continue all of this work. And, we do all this literacy work during the school year, but having a place where we can continue that important work in the summer and in the evenings and outside of the school day is going to be really important to us as well.
That's amazing. And best of luck on your sustainability as well as your next big project. And thank you both so much for joining me today and reminding us of the impact we can make when generations come together around shared values like education, equality, and community. It has been a pleasure, and I'm excited to share this with our audience.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you for listening to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, a unique program focused on aging with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience. You can find links and show notes from this episode on our website at friendslifecare.org/podcast. Thank you to Kerry Roeder and Jean Hurd for joining us today. You can learn more about Historic Fair Hill by visiting historicfairhill.com and Instagram. If you like our show, please rate, review, subscribe, and join us next time. To learn more about aging with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience, subscribe to our blog at friendslifecare.org/blog.